Hello, YouTube. I had the intention of doing a particular video, and I actually did try to do it. I recorded it. It didn't go very well because of the fact that I sort of got way off topic onto another important topic that sort of pertains to the rest of what I was saying, but it it was a little jumbled and I didn't really like how it went. So what I decided to do is I'm going to scratch the idea that I was originally going to do with this video and do a little side video that'll sort of help explain things for the next one. Um, what I want to talk about is the Uncanny Valley. Now, I think I might have mentioned this in another video a while back, but I can't remember. And I think that talking about Avatar, talking about CG, talking about all of these things, the Uncanny Valley is a very important thing to keep in mind. And a very important thing that happens in our brains that tricks us into thinking something is good or bad. I'll put it that way. Um, Basically, what the Uncanny Valley is this measurement. I can't remember the name of the scientist who came up with this Japanese robotics guy, but it's how our brains. It's a scale of how our brains detect people from other things, basically, people from non-people, such as robots or CG characters. Um, and the closer something gets to being like a human, the more disturbing and unsettling it becomes to us. Examples. Um, if you ever see some of the Japanese robots that have an actual face, they kind of look like real dolls, but they can talk and stuff. It could be really creepy to watch these things. Um, because Beowulf or Final Fantasy movie where they were trying to create actual people through CG, and they were trying to make them look as much like real people as they possibly could. But our brains still recognize them as being wrong somehow. Basically, what it is our brains all one of the biggest things that our brains do, that our brains spend every day doing, is recognizing people and recognizing the difference between people. And so our brains are so hardwired to know what a person is supposed to look like that when something looks like a person but doesn't, it really fucks our brain. Like, it really makes us uncomfortable. Basically, one of the things that I've learned is the reason for this is that our brains are trying to recognize this thing as a person, but it sees that there's something wrong with it, and more is recognizing it as somebody that's sick or somebody that's dead. Um, Now, a lot of uh, cartoonists, particularly Pixar, when designing characters, keep this in mind because there are a few ways of sort of creating a character that um, won't affect a person in this way. Um, Particularly, one way of doing it is by creating a human character that's more of an exaggerated, cartoony human character. Think about the way that people look in Pixar movies, particularly like Up and The Incredibles. They're people. We know that they're people, but they're very weird looking, and their proportions aren't like actual human proportions. So our brains aren't really trying to recognize them as being an actual human being. Um, Another way of getting around this is by making a character not a human at all. Um, I was watching an episode of Scientific America in which, and it was an older one because Stan Winston was still alive, and he was a part of this project to create this robot that would have this giant computer brain, but it was an actual robot that would be connected to this computer and would be able to see and hear and feel and everything as basically an interactive teaching tool. And they decided to not make it look like a person because they knew that it would be unsettling and difficult for a person to connect to it and do what the robot needed to do if it looked like a scary robot person. So what they decided to do is make this adorable robot creature that kind of looked like a cross between a gremlin and a Pomeranian. And had big ears and it had little 4-fingered hands and stuff. And that, to me, is what James Cameron did. Instead of trying to make, like, our brains were tricked into, some of our brains were tricked into thinking that the creature character effects in Avatar were better than they were because our brains weren't trying to recognize them as being people, because they were kitty cats. And because of that slight disconnect in our brains, they looked better than they actually were. And this is the Uncanny Valley thing. This is us recognizing something as not being a person. So our brains don't really care how well they're put together. I'm trying to think of another, like, again, I think Beowulf and the Final Fantasy movie are the two best examples because those were really, oh, and the one with Tom Hanks, Polar Express, and the new Christmas Carol movie. Those were all attempts of trying to make people, CG people, look like real people. But again, complete disconnect because of the fact that our brain is still trying to recognize it as being an actual living human being. And it won't do that. Whereas these were kitty cats, so our brains didn't need to do that. So I think that that is definitely one of the reasons why I still didn't, like, I didn't buy the fact that these effects were any better than a lot of other shit we've seen. Than a lot of shit we saw in the freaking 3 Star Wars prequels. You know? These aren't giant leaps in technology, folks. Was a mashup of a lot of technologies we already had. And not even, again, not even in that impressive kind of way. But for my next video, hopefully you'll watch this one first and understand when I reference Uncanny Valley. And hopefully it'll be a help. Alright. See you next time.